On this Saturday night, the vaccination marathon in Canada. From drive-thrus,
first dose or second dose,
to pop-up clinics.
We're definitely not going to get there unless those who are profoundly vaccine skeptical are convinced to come around.
The push for provinces to meet their targets. Troubling signs of the Delta variant and low vaccination rates in the United States. Plus, the affordable solution in Calgary. Empty offices converted into housing. And Juneteenth, the American holiday. A reminder of how far it still has to go.
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Canada has hit a major milestone in the fight against COVID-19. Over 75% of eligible Canadians have now received at least one vaccine dose. 20% are fully vaccinated. Those are the targets the Public Health Agency of Canada said were needed for provinces to begin safely easing restrictions. It's the path out of this pandemic, and provinces are pushing hard to see it through. Mike Drolet has our top story tonight.
It's not one of those summer festivals BC residents are used to. And while Surrey's round-the-clock Vaxathon will have entertainment, the focus is clearly on the COVID-19 vaccine.
Sure, it's a good thing. Anytime they can get more needles in people, it's good.
The push to increase vaccination numbers is well underway across the country. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney is happy enough with 70% of eligible people in the province getting their first shot that he announced virtually all health restrictions would be lifted on July 1st. Mask mandates will also be lifted, although municipal rules governing their use, such as one in Calgary, may remain in place.
Today, I want to say we did it. You did it.
Health experts aren't as bullish on Alberta's plan, since it was drafted before the arrival of the Delta variant first discovered in India. It's now the dominant strain in the UK, spreading quickly amongst unvaccinated people. And while the Delta numbers are still relatively low in Canada, they're growing. And epidemiologists now say a 90% vaccination rate is likely needed for herd immunity.
So we need all adults and a fair number of children to get vaccinated before we reach herd immunity. We're definitely not going to get there unless those who are profoundly vaccine skeptical are convinced to come around.
Good morning, everybody. How you doing? Hi. You come in.
Ontario is taking a more cautious approach than its western cousins, putting its focus on boosting the vaccine rate. In Toronto, where 75% of the population have received at least one shot and 25% are fully vaccinated, 38 vaccine clinics are now operating, many targeting underserviced or hesitant populations, like this one for the Indigenous community.
They have a variety of reasons, historically and otherwise, to be hesitant about coming to a city-run clinic, for example.
For now, the plan in Ontario is to move into stage 2 of reopening on July 2nd. To join Alberta's maskless summer, more vaccine-hesitant adults will have to be convinced to roll up their sleeves. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
In the United Kingdom, vaccination efforts are being ramped up to beat the Delta variant. Tens of thousands of people are lining up across the country as part of Super Saturday. Vaccine clinics have been set up at several sports facilities, including London's Olympic Stadium. All adults are now eligible to get the shot, and the government hopes the mass vaccination centres will make it easier for everyone to get the jab. So far, at least 81% of the UK's adult population has received at least one dose. There's growing concern the Delta variant could cause a new wave of COVID-19 cases in the United States. The average vaccination rate is now over 50%, but in dozens of communities, it's less than 20%. And as Jackson Proskow explains, doctors fear that could lead to a COVID-19 resurgence.
Reopening is cause for celebration across the U.S. as COVID case counts and deaths dip to their lowest points in the pandemic. But in the American South, there's concern below average rates of vaccination, coupled with the highly contagious Delta variant, could lead to a brand new wave.
Does the Delta variant change the equation?
It does change the equation. The virus spreads more rapidly. You have a much greater chance of getting it. So the vaccine is your one surefire way of preventing getting sick.
Lower vaccination rates have been driven partially by hesitancy and partially by a belief that the pandemic is over. In some areas, the number of vaccinated individuals is abysmally low, risking a virus resurgence.
We have over 100 counties in this country right now that have less than 20% of the residents vaccinated. Those are time bombs waiting to happen. This virus will find you if you're not vaccinated.
That's already the case in the United Kingdom, where a Delta variant-driven surge has caused the country to delay its national reopening. In the U.S., Delta now makes up about 10% of all cases and is likely to become the dominant version of the virus soon.
It tends to look like it might even be more serious in making people ill.
Still, doctors expect any new surge to look different than the ones before it. Older and more vulnerable people tend to be vaccinated at higher rates, meaning fewer potential hospitalizations.
This virus has serious complications, serious side effects, even in 30-year-olds, even in 40-year-olds, 20-year-olds even.
In the race to vaccinate, the White House has turned to a more intimate push, working with community leaders, even barbershops, to sell the importance of inoculation, warning the Delta variant is so contagious that it threatens to roll back the clock on recovery. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
Conflicting public health advice has left Canadians confused about what they should do for their second vaccine dose, especially those who got AstraZeneca as their first. On this week's edition of the West Block, Mercedes Stevenson talks with one of the country's top medical minds about whether Canadians have anything to be concerned about as the science and vaccine guidance evolve. Mercedes.
Robin, I spoke with Dr. Peter Yourex, the scientific director of Ontario's COVID-19 Science Advisory Table. He says in order to get the optimal solution for everyone, the scientific advice has to change as scientists get more information about how the vaccines work and respond.
We're working at high speed as scientists to get this right, and knowledge evolves. What the public needs to understand is that science never gives you complete certainty. I mean, that's like in life, you know, there are no guarantees here. We try to get it as good as it gets, and right now we're really on the right track.
I also asked him what many Canadians are wondering about this summer. If travel restrictions will be relaxed for the fully vaccinated, what does that mean for families with small children who are too young to get a vaccine? Dr. Yourex says the priority needs to be on ensuring that more variants do not arrive in this country.
It's clear if you are not fully vaccinated, you will need to be very careful. And from my perspective, this would mean if we travel with children, the children would need to undergo the regular quarantine and would need to get tested repetitively, not just once. And that's just how it is right now. We don't have vaccines yet that are approved for kids.
Dr. Yourex says he's hopeful by September vaccines will be approved for children under the age of 12. Robin?
Mercedes Stevenson in Ottawa. Thanks, Mercedes. And you can watch the full interview tomorrow on the West Block right here on Global. The AstraZeneca shot hasn't been approved in the United States, and it's proving to be difficult to get into venues in some parts of the U.S. But a Broadway production has just done an about-face on the issue. Springsteen on Broadway says it will now allow audience members fully vaccinated with AstraZeneca. It had previously said anyone wishing to attend needed to be immunized with U.S.-approved vaccines. But other attractions like Saturday Night Live and The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon still say AstraZeneca recipients cannot attend live tapings. Many of us have been waiting for the moment we can begin traveling again. Travel experts say the time to book flights is now, before prices go up. There are good deals out there. It all depends on where and when you want to go, and there are conditions. Our business reporter Anne Gaviola explains what you need to look for.
Passenger air traffic has limped along during the pandemic, but as the economy reopens and quarantine restrictions ease, demand is slowly returning, and there are deals to be found. You could book a flight from Toronto to New York and back for $280 in August, or from Calgary to London's Gatwick Airport in September for less than $700 a return. There are deep discounts on routes to major cities that used to have a lot of business travelers: New York, Chicago, Las Vegas, especially if you can fly out midweek, but fewer deals for domestic travel and trips to Eastern Europe and Asia. Packages for sun destinations are selling like hotcakes, many hoping to get ahead of expected price hikes and book before they sell out.
Demand is going to increase, and there's no doubt about it. So I think the early bird gets the worm here, as long as you can live with the restrictions on the fare if you want to make changes.
Airlines are offering deals hoping to convince people who've mostly stayed away for the past year to get on board. With low-cost carriers like Flair Airlines, which is expanding across the country, travelers can save a lot if they do some legwork.
They really want to encourage people to start thinking about traveling again. It's been out of our mind for 18 months almost now.
But experts are advising consumers to look beyond the lowest possible price. Read the fine print to understand what extra costs could come with a change of plans. Coronavirus variants could shift re-entry requirements and travel restrictions. And there's a moving target that's a key factor that affects prices: the cost of oil.
Fuel is a big cost factor for the airlines. So if the price of oil is going up, they're either adjusting that in the fares, and of course they can set fares by the hour.
Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Despite the threat of the Delta variant, many Canadian provinces are starting to reopen. It's been more than a year of stay-at-home orders and social distancing, and understandably, some Canadians may be reluctant to re-enter society. Jamie Mauracher explains.
Seeing people gathered on this Ottawa patio, Tasha Stansbury feels triggered.
I know that I'm not in danger, but it's more of a sense of, what are we doing?
The 27-year-old is living with social anxiety, and she says it's making Ontario's reopening a difficult adjustment.
Definitely the experience of the pandemic has lowered my sense of being able to trust the people around me.
According to an Ipsos poll exclusive to Global News, 51% of Canadians feel anxious about resuming normal activities.
But I don't want to be anywhere near a crowd.
Mother of two, Paula Shuck, says her daughter's already suffered from anxiety, but COVID has added another level of stress.
If they've come to the grocery store with me to help or something, they give themselves an hour in the room afterwards because it's just a lot after being so isolated.
Although not official, this strange feeling associated to transitioning into society after endless lockdowns has been coined by mental health experts south of the border as cave syndrome.
We've all been at such a heightened state of vigilance. It takes some time for your body and your mind to come down from that.
Psychiatrist Sarah Levitt says doing new things a little at a time can help. It's when anxiety is out of proportion with the threat that it can become problematic.
We see that from SARS, that for some people it was years afterwards that they experienced mental health distress.
In this case, experts suggest seeking out a professional. Back in Ottawa, although Stansbury says she's vaccinated and wears a mask, even the idea of walking through a crowded street is nerve-wracking.
I'll get a little bit sweaty, I'll feel a little bit short of breath.
A physical reaction she hopes will subside with time. Jamie Mauracher, Global News, Toronto.
In Winnipeg, a 12-year-old boy is dead after being stabbed during a fight between two groups. It happened last night. Police arrived to find the 12-year-old seriously injured, lying on the street. He was transported to hospital where he succumbed to his injuries.
I struggle with finding a word to describe this homicide, specifically the involvement of the 12-year-old that became deceased. There's a number of details involved that are particularly troubling, details that we may be able to share when charges are laid, but there's some details ultimately that will perhaps come out when this is dealt with in the court system.
No charges have been laid yet, but police say their investigation has progressed significantly. Coming up, the coronation of Iran's new president, the subject of U.S. sanctions. And the third major storm of the hurricane season pummels the Gulf Coast. Tropical storm Claudette soaked the U.S. Gulf Coast. The storm-packed winds topping 70 kilometers an hour and dropped up to 250 millimeters of rain on parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, where it also spawned a tornado. The system could affect Atlantic Canada early next week. Claudette is already the third named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season, which is forecast to be a busy one. Iran's hardline chief justice will be the country's next president. The election of Ibrahim Raisi is widely seen as a coronation because he's the supreme leader's protege. Raisi has been sanctioned by the United States for his involvement in the mass execution of thousands of political prisoners. He may have won by 18 million votes, but there was voter apathy, and it led to the lowest turnout in the country's history. Myanmar's military is condemning a United Nations resolution calling for a global arms embargo against the Southeast Asian country. The rare resolution passed in the General Assembly Friday, citing the military's excessive and lethal violence since carrying out a coup in February. At least 860 people have died in the crackdown that followed. Myanmar's foreign ministry says the resolution is based on one-sided sweeping allegations and false assumptions. Today, demonstrators took to the streets of the country's largest city to call for the release of democratically elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi. She's been detained since the military seized power nearly 5 months ago. The protest coincided with her 76th birthday. Working from home and living in offices still ahead, the plan to fill Calgary's empty core. The pandemic has made working from home the new normal for many Canadians. As a result, office buildings across Canada are empty. The latest data shows the office vacancy rate hit 6.2% in Vancouver. In Toronto, it's just over 9%. But in Calgary, it sits at a 32% vacancy rate. That city has been struggling to fill office high-rises. And as Heather Yourex-West explains, Calgary has come up with a solution to fill those empty spaces with affordable housing.
It's called Sierra Place, a downtown Calgary high-rise that was once the busy office headquarters for Dome Petroleum and other companies. For years now, it's been empty, part of the city's growing glut of vacant office space.
Unbelievably bad. I feel like I've said over the last number of years that the downtown vacancy problem is unbelievably bad. It's bad now.
In fact, in 2020, Calgary's downtown vacancy rate hit a record high of nearly 27%, and it's not expected to get better anytime soon. There are 16 buildings in the city that are currently completely vacant, thanks to both the energy sector downturn and COVID-19. But in this 10-story tower, a transformation is underway.
Our vision for this project is a multi-generational family hub, and what this represents to families who are experiencing homelessness or on the edge of homelessness is it represents hope.
Over the next year, these former boardrooms and law offices will become studio, 1- or 2-bedroom apartments, affordable housing units in a city with a desperate need for more. It's the first of its kind project in Alberta, and a test case many eyes are on.
I think there are a lot of people and a lot of levels of government and partners across the country who are going to be watching this.
Calgary City Council is hoping the idea will catch on. In addition to the $5.5 million in support it's promised this project, the city is also establishing a $45 million fund. It hopes will entice developers to remake other vacant office towers as well.
We've had one purely private sector conversion. This is our first attempt at an affordable housing conversion. It is a bit of an experiment to see how well it goes, but certainly there are buildings downtown Calgary that have very good bones.
A potential solution to two problems that post-pandemic are certainly not Calgary's alone. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
To elephant watch in China, the now famous herd that's trekked hundreds of kilometers could be heading home. The team that's been tracking the 15 elephants says the herd has shown a trend of returning south. But scientists still can't figure out the herd's specific route. The elephants left their wildlife reserve in March of 2020. That was 15 months ago. Their epic road trip has received international attention. Up next, the official end of slavery is officially a U.S. holiday. The group Black Lives Matter held a rally outside Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's office demanding changes to the justice system and renewing a call to defund the police. The demonstration included families of Black and Indigenous people who died during interactions with police. That event took place as Americans mark Juneteenth, the anniversary of the end of slavery in the United States. On June 19, 1865, enslaved Black people in Galveston, Texas, learned the Civil War was over, and the Emancipation Proclamation had freed them 2.5 years earlier. More than 150 years later, Juneteenth is now finally a federal holiday. Here's Jennifer Johnson.
The storm is passing over.
From Boston to San Francisco, Juneteenth is finally being celebrated across the U.S.
Some people don't realize that Juneteenth is America's story. They think it's solely a black story. This is a story of all Americans.
On this day in 1865, Union Army General Gordon Granger came to Galveston, Texas, and informed the last American slaves they were free, 2 months after the Civil War had ended and over 2 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation.
Think about that. For more than 2 years, the enslaved people of Texas were kept in servitude.
After swift passage in both the House and Senate, U.S. President Joe Biden signed a law making Juneteenth an official national holiday.
This is a day of profound, in my view, profound weight and profound power.
Many Americans, even those in Galveston, never knew of June 19th's history, why artist Reginald Adams painted this mural in the city.
I want people to be inspired and hopefully learn something that they didn't know before they saw the work of art.
Black Americans have waited decades for this holiday to be recognized on a federal level. 9 states had already designated Juneteenth as an official paid state holiday.
Juneteenth.
Many others had resolutions and proclamations. Only South Dakota does not mark the day in any form.
No justice, no peace!
But after the death of George Floyd and demonstrations that followed, there was a renewed spotlight on racial injustice in America and a greater push to remember this important day in history.
We were all in the same valley of suffering together. The sand was shifting underneath all of us at the same time.
The Biden administration is being praised for its action, with some fellow lawmakers taking additional steps, requiring the history of this day to be taught in schools.
With this change, the people of Illinois will have a day to reflect on how the freedom that we celebrate just 2 weeks later on the 4th of July was delayed to Black Americans.
Now all Americans will at least recognize the name of this holiday, while many others will have an official day to celebrate it. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
And that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, Your Canada is this field of horses near Gore Bay on Manitoulin Island in Ontario. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night.